Hi, I'm Jo Clark, and thanks so much for joining me today. This is the Redefining Midlife podcast, a podcast designed for the 40-plus woman who is determined to challenge society's myths and beliefs around midlife. It's for the woman who is inspired and ready to define midlife her way. Join me each week as I chat to health and wellness experts for up-to-date information on how to live well, as well as some special conversations with incredible everyday women redefining what midlife can look like. Here's to making our next half of life even better than the first. Before we start today's episode, I'd like to say a big thanks to Your Style Collective for leaving a special review on Apple Podcast. It says, "Loving Jo's podcast, always insightful and inspiring, proving what we all knew, that there is life after 40, and yes, it's so good." Thanks so much for sharing your thoughts. And I agree. There's so much life to live after the age of 40. We're only getting started. We need to remember that. Now, if an episode resonates with you, I'd love for you to leave a review or rating or share it with someone else that you know who would enjoy it. Now on to today's episode. It's one that's going to take you on an emotional roller coaster. I've got the pleasure of introducing Gabi Haberer to you. Now, Gabi is a homemaker, writer, teacher, and is truly a beautiful soul. In this episode, Gabi is going to be sharing openly and vulnerably her heartbreaking story of becoming a widow, as well as talking about the beautiful new chapter that she's created for herself and her son. Gabi talks about her conscious decision to live and to teach the principles of what's called unhurried living. She says that crafting a place of rest and peace for ourselves and our families is more important now than ever before. And Gabi encourages mothers to view elevating the daily rhythms of life-giving work at home so families find rest, faith, and hope in an unhurried, home-centered life. I hope that this episode might just help you to rethink how you can start to live a less busy and more unhurried life. So, Gabi, I'm absolutely thrilled that you said yes to come and join us on the podcast today so you can share your amazing story with the listeners. And I'd like you to be able to share your thoughts, your experiences, and your way of life with us. So welcome.
Oh, thank you. It's a privilege. Thank you so much, Jo. I'm excited to be here.
You're very welcome. Now, Gabi, before we get started, can you tell us a little bit about where you're living at the moment? Because obviously the listeners will hear that you have an American accent. So most of the listeners at this point in time are actually either in Australia or New Zealand. So just tell us a little bit about where you're living.
How lovely. Yes, I'm in Texas, in the great state of Texas. We consider ourselves our own country in and of itself at times, but I am here in the U.S., not far outside of the Houston area, so down south, but was just in Australia with you just a few weeks ago. And so, yeah, just beautiful culture. I so enjoyed my time there, but here in the U.S. currently.
And you live on some land. So are you on acreage or are you on a large?
Yes, I have a little bit of acreage. Yeah, absolutely. I have a homestead. I have a small homestead and have goats and chickens and ducks and just kind of run my own production here, milking goats, making cheese and soaps and we sell. My son has a little egg selling business, and so it's lovely. I live out in the country. That's true. Live in the city once, but live out in the country now.
Fantastic. And we'll get more into that style of life that you have created for you and your son as well. Gabi, what I love to do in my show is just to talk also about the younger years of what you were like when you were growing up, what your childhood was like, and then what life was like for you as a teenage woman or young teenager going into womanhood, because that really shapes the person that we are today and perhaps even the direction of life that we go into. So tell us a little bit more about you, your life growing up and the dreams that you may have had at that stage.
Oh, thank you. Well, I am first generation Cuban Mexican, and so half of my family's Cuban, the other half is Mexican. I really don't know much about the Mexican culture because my mom, so in Latin cultures, it's typically the mother's side of the family that is just full and abundant, and so that's where we spent most of. I grew up in that culture, but first generation, my parents are immigrants; they are U.S. citizens, but growing up, I grew up in a predominantly Caucasian community. I was the only Hispanic, only Latin girl in school. I'm, obviously tanner. I wanted to be blonde hair, blue eyed like everyone else was. And their houses smelled like vanilla and my house smelled like rice and beans. And, I didn't
Yeah.
experience, I can't say I experienced any discrimination necessarily, but I knew that I was different. And I always wanted to belong. I always wanted a group of friends and just never really quite fit in elementary, junior high, high school. So I was kind of a solitary kid, not from desire, not from interest, simply because I just was different than everyone else.
Yeah.
I never felt any sort of, again, any sort of racism or anything, but I guess it existed. I mean, if I was the only brown girl in the whole
Mm.
community and everyone else wasn't, then there was a reason I guess I was on the outs. But, my parents did experience some discrimination when I was growing up. And so they made very intentional efforts to make sure that I spoke English very well. The Spanish is my first language,
Yes.
but I ended up having to, essentially, I wasn't allowed to speak Spanish in school or at home because my parents really believed that I needed to assimilate into the culture. And so that was a little bit of a challenge,
Yeah.
but I worked really hard to speak English and to speak it well. And but anyway, I grew up in just a very structured family. I wish there had been a little bit more freedom. My mother, the matriarch, the mother's always kind of the one that runs a kind of Latin homes. And yeah, every detail about my life was navigated and controlled, what I wore, how I wore my hair, all those things.
Yeah.
So when I graduated high school, I didn't go wild, Joe, but I did feel like I had more freedom. And so I went off to college, and my parents were not able to pay for my college studies, my university studies. And so I had to take on 3 jobs really at
Wow.
any point in time. I worked as a bank teller and taught aerobics and things like
Yeah.
all around my school schedule. And I wanted to be a writer. And I
Ah.
remember my father, who was an engineer, and had a difficult go of it here in the US, said, "You cannot be a writer. No one will ever pay you to write. You need to go be a teacher and do something sustainable that's always going to have a need or a demand." And so
Mhm.
I was the good girl and decided to go become a teacher, although I didn't really want to. And so I became an elementary school teacher and thought, well, okay, if I'm kind of good at this, how do I make this a career? So I went out in masters and eventually became an elementary school principal. But in the end, Joe, when you're doing something that you're just, you may have giftings for it and talents, and you might like it okay, but you don't
Yeah.
really love it.
Yeah.
That's kind of where I was. But I didn't get married until, goodness, my very late 20s, early 30s.
Yeah.
And my husband was the one that had the discernment to say, have you considered staying home? And I thought, I have degrees. I'm important. Why in the world would I stay home? But that decision, and he essentially suggested that I just try it for a little bit and essentially take on the role of a homemaker. And we didn't have children at the time.
Mhm.
And so I did. And then, of course, when my firstborn came along, Joe, I couldn't be separated from him. He just, he's just so beautiful, my first child, and so we decided to homeschool, and I decided to stay home full time
Yeah.
permanently. And my husband was absolutely the supporter of it. He was the initiator, the instigator, and then the supporter of it. And so, yeah, I became a homemaker. But it's interesting because I think that homemaking is not, at least here in the U.S., it's considered less than, if you
Mhm.
will,
Mm.
and especially for women. Why would a woman stay home? It's
Yeah.
almost, there's the connotation of oppression exists in the idea of homemaking. And for
Mm.
me, I was like, oh wow, actually, I think I was made for this. I
Yeah.
work a lot harder in the home than I ever worked out in the business world. This is, I mean, having to juggle a crying baby and then getting
Mhm.
supper on the table and then doing 2 loads of laundry and putting that away and then helping my neighbors. And I mean, it just was, it's a lot.
That's so
And
interesting when you
so
said that, Gabby, about that whole, and it's similar to in Australia with that culture here as well.
really,
Because well, I suppose women worked hard in the past, like our mother's generation and the women
Mhm.
before us worked hard for our generation of women to go to university or to find, if they didn't go to university, to have a career in somewhere else. So they had that choice. But I think we
Mhm.
forget that that is a choice. We do have a choice
Absolutely.
whether we want to go and form a career or go and work or do whatever or stay at home or
Absolutely.
do both. There is no right or
Mhm.
wrong, and I think that's so important. The sisterhood can sometimes be frowning and very judgy of others, and you go,
Yes,
"Hang
I
on, let's
agree.
let's let's just think about it." For me, I've got the choice whether I want to continue or to stay at home, and I choose to stay at home. So yeah, that's really important
No,
when you
I
look at
absolutely
it.
agree, Joe. And I'm so grateful that I had the opportunity to be educated. I had to work all through college.
Yes.
Nothing was handed to me. I worked through college. I had this clunky car that I didn't know if it was going to start on most days to get me to class. I ate here in the US. There are they're terrible. I mean, horrible, no nutrition, but these things called ramen noodles.
Oh,
They're just like dried pasta in a cup. I
2 minute
can't
noodles
tell
is
you
what we call them here.
Yes, I can't tell you how many times I had to eat that because I didn't
Yeah.
have any money. I didn't have
Yeah.
anything. Every single dime I went to rent and went to books.
Yeah.
And the little bit I had left over went to food. And so
Yes.
nothing was handed to me, but I'm so grateful for my education.
Mm.
However, when I made that decision, or ultimately when the beauty of that decision was revealed to me, I just thought, oh, I was designed to I thrive at home, and really believe I was made to be a placemaker. I love cultivating home or space, so that the people that come, the visitors, the neighbors, my family, my loved ones, the ones that are already in my house, have a place of comfort and rest, a respite, if you will, from the outside world. And that's where I thrive. I love being home. And so I stayed home with my firstborn, and then my second one came and I lost my second one. And then
Oh,
a third one came and I lost my third one. So I had two miscarriages after my firstborn.
okay.
And after that, I don't know, Joe, I struggled. I was so afraid of conceiving. I was so afraid of losing
Yes.
another that we stopped trying to have another. And so I only have one son.
Yeah.
He will be 12 next month. And not out long after not long after I lost my second one, I became very ill. I don't know. I went to doctors. Nobody could figure out what was wrong with me. I can't went through a battery of doctors, tons of tests. Nobody could figure out what had happened. And I came across an article about food as medicine. And
Mhm.
here in the US, drive-throughs and restaurants and processed foods, it's a really big deal here. A
Mm.
lot of the things that are not permitted in other countries, such as Australia, England, are actually allowed by the health regulators. The food industry here, in
Mm.
my opinion, is a lot more toxic than it is in other countries. And so I found an article about food healing, and I put myself on a protocol, a diet, if you will. And within 30 days of eating clean, organic, made from scratch food, my body, it was a night and day difference.
Wow.
And so that was an interesting season, an interesting experience. I became my own researcher, if you will.
Mm.
But what I didn't know is that shortly after I began to find healing, my husband was diagnosed with a brain tumor. He had a seizure in the middle of the night. We had no idea he had a brain tumor.
How
At
old
the
was he at
ER,
this
the emergency
stage,
room. He
Gabby?
was, I don't know, Joe. He must have been 44,
Wow.
maybe
Yeah.
44, I guess. That's a good question. I'll have to go back and do the math on that one.
Yeah.
And healthy, strong, went to the gym every day, just built like a football player. He just was tall, robust, healthy, athletic, and had a seizure in the middle of the night. And we found ourselves in the emergency room, and it was the size of a golf ball.
Oh my
And
goodness.
a lot of it was inoperable. It was so entrenched into the brain that we couldn't remove most of it. So we had options. We had here in the US, they immediately push you towards chemotherapy and radiation and surgery. And having learned what I learned about the body through my own health issues, I knew that there were alternatives. I wouldn't have known that had I not gotten sick. And so we went towards a more holistic, biological, natural route. We consulted with doctors all over the world, and we set our own protocols, consulted with doctors, and just essentially learned and implemented as we went along.
Yeah.
It was 3.5 years of a struggle. We had met survivors of brain tumors. He had a tumor called a glioblastoma, which is, there are some very high profile individuals here in this country that died. There's a Senator John McCain, who was one of our US senators. A Kennedy also died of a glioblastoma. The average survival rate is about 18 to 24 months. Most people die within 6 to 8 months of
Goodness.
the diagnosis. but we had met some survivors there. We met a 19-year survivor. We met another one that was 12 years into her journey. And they had used holistic, natural supplementation, high dose vitamin C, lots of health modalities that are really kind of frowned upon here in the US. I think that you guys have more acceptance of some of the natural remedies, but here in the US, it's a very cloistered, very closed down system. You very much have to go conventional, and the others are not even permitted. So my husband had to fly to Germany to get some holistic treatment that is not available here in the US until after you've gone through multiple rounds of chemo and you're in hospice. The government then allows you the right to try some of these natural remedies. And so we rejected that route altogether and went holistic. And he endured 3.5 years of that, but he ultimately passed away from a surgery complication. The tumor had grown, so we had killed the original tumor. So cancer feeds on fat, sugar, and protein. And we managed to starve the original tumor, but inside of that original tumor was a higher grade glioma that was growing. And it had already created its own blood vessel system.
Wow.
And so we didn't catch that one because we were scanning, but we were scanning without what's called gadolinium. Gadolinium is a heavy metal that illuminates a brain tumor or illuminates cancerous tumors in the body. And but it also has some toxicity. And my husband exhibited a sensitivity, so we were scanning without. And so we didn't see this higher grade glioma in there until it was too late. It had pushed his brain past mid-center and he was having more seizures. So we had to have a surgery and there was a complication and he ultimately passed away from the surgery. He passed away in June of 2021. So almost going on 2 years. But it was the most difficult season. I was this full-time caretaker. Can't tell you how many times we couldn't get the seizures under control, even with conventional medicine. Nothing worked to control the seizures. And so I can't tell you, Joe, how many times we were at the emergency room getting stitches because he busted his nose again, or his eyebrow, his forehead or his chin, or I didn't know, Joe, honestly, how long we could sustain that. It was a 24-hour-a-day job. I still had my son at home. I was homeschooling. But you just do the next thing in front of you. When you're in that season, you don't even, you're overwhelmed, you're stressed. But you just do the next thing because the end goal was he has to live. I have to keep him alive. How do I keep him alive? Let me do this next thing. And it's the hardest season of my life, I'd say. It was really difficult.
It would have been extremely difficult, Gabi. So thank you for sharing that. I appreciate you.
Thank you.
It's it would have been absolutely horrific to see your life partner going through something like that.
And he was so beautiful, Joe. He was tall and healthy, and and then in his latter days, he was frail and thin, and he'd aged 30, 40 years. To see someone so vibrant and so beautiful and so full of life.
Yes.
Yeah, that's
how did your son cope with all of that, Gabi, seeing his father? Like that would have been really difficult as well. I mean, difficult for you as wife, but for your son.
Thank you. The thing being a mother, and you carry your own grief, but you also carry their grief, yours in layers almost, because you wish you could have kept him from that. I wish that I could have protected him from that. I wish that I could have given him his father back. I wish that he didn't have to see his father lying in a pool of blood again when he had another seizure, and this time he broke his nose. And there are so many things that we couldn't do anymore as a family. We couldn't go to our swimming pool because Dad couldn't be near the water because he could have a seizure at any time. We missed out on a lot of our homeschooling co-ops and events because, I can't go today, Bubba, because I have to watch Dad, and Dad can't go because he could have a seizure, and he had seizures in the car. He had seizures at the park. And so there was just a significant amount of limitations then now placed on my son because, I couldn't be in two places at one time. I couldn't do two things, and I couldn't leave my husband alone. Or if I did leave him alone to go to the supermarket, I would say, you can't get up off this couch. And then I'm rushing through the supermarket and driving as fast, to try to be able to get there and get back. So those 3.5 years were hard on him too. But I'm so thankful that, I have done, Joe, sometimes you even overcompensate, if you will, but you just showered my son with love and attention and devotion. anything to try to help him to know that that I'm still here. But now, at such a young age, he has an awareness
Mm.
of how short and how fragile and how delicate life really is. And I wish I could take that from him, but I have to trust. I'm a Christian. I have to trust that that the Lord is sovereign over those things. I can't control that. I can't, and hope that that experience will shape him in good ways that'll be of benefit to him one day,
Yes.
instead of the ones that ultimately can drag him down or hold him back or depress him. Or I just have to trust that we just keep moving forward and that life is still good and beautiful and lovely and wonderful and has so many precious things in it. Let's go out and look for the lovely things instead of the
Yes.
things that, yeah, that hold us back.
Yes.
So,
Well, it's lovely he had the less pressured way of life as well during this time. So he did have
Joe,
those
yeah.
special moments with his father as well.
Oh, I'm
That would
very
have,
grateful for that. I'm very grateful that last year of his life, he was unable to work really, and so we had him home. Now, the brain tumor made him sleep about 20 hours a day. Like, he just was asleep all day, and so I was a single mom for, quite a number of years, but single mom that had to stay home because I couldn't leave him,
yeah.
at home, and so my son was with me, but, it's, I thank the Lord that we had freedom with homeschooling and with the lifestyle that we had chosen, in order to be able to, yeah, to be there with my husband before he passed
Yes.
away, for sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
So how did you go then with the desperation of the time that you had there, the caring for your son, but yet you had to think about your future? How was that for you to be muddling all of those different things? Was it a time of, oh, yeah, I can't put myself, I can imagine what it's like, Gabby,
Mm.
but being in your shoes, at what point did you go, okay, I am going to be okay, I will get through this? Or was there moments of
Oh,
absolute
wow.
desperation or everything
Both?
cracked up?
All 3 of those? Yes, all
Yeah.
3 of the options that it's interesting because I had stayed home, and I couldn't foresee myself going back into the workforce because I thought, well, let's say my husband has a surgery. One of the risks of the surgery, and we were told up front, is he could end up paralyzed because of where the tumor is. So he will either be paralyzed completely, the tumor was on the right side temple. He will be completely paralyzed on the left side, or we could have other complications as a result. So just know that he won't come out of this surgery unscathed. And so I thought, well, what do I do? I won't go back to the classroom. I can't work outside the home. We're committed to homeschooling. For our family anyway, it was the best solution.
Yes.
And I now may have to be a caretaker of my husband who needs 24-hour care. So what do I do? I
Mm.
thought, well, I'm a piano teacher. I went to school for piano performance. I'm a pianist. I'm a cellist. I'm going to go back and teach piano lessons, and I'm going to do them at my home. And maybe, should my husband be at a place where he can no longer work, at least I have my small little business that, well, we didn't have any debt. We were,
Yeah.
debt free. We owned our house, our cars. I just need food to live on, right?
Mhm.
So that's all I need. And so I opened up a piano studio, and thankfully it became successful. And so I moved it into a brick and mortar. And then COVID hit. And so COVID comes, and I thought, well, now what do I do? And so I went online. I created a membership community online and had homeschooling families that were part of this membership community. And so, but as he got more ill, because he was able to work the first 2 years of the
Wow.
diagnosis, it was slow. He was a much
Yeah.
slower person, would have seizures at the office, could no longer drive. So in those 3.5 years, he couldn't drive. I had to drive him everywhere, and he took the bus
Yes.
into town. But I thought, if something goes wrong and I have to be the breadwinner here, how's that going to work? But COVID hit, and I opened up an online membership community. But as he did become more ill, I ultimately sold that community because my husband required, I couldn't even create content for the membership anymore. He just needed full-time
Yeah.
care.
Yeah.
And then when he passed away, oh, I don't know, Joe, you don't think about the future. You don't even know which way is up. You don't even know. I couldn't leave my house for the first 6 months.
Yes.
Um, you and I are part of a mastermind. And at one point in time, I just disconnected from everything. The world seems so big, Joe. It was, because you go out and you go to the grocery store and everybody's going about their lives. Yes, they all have stories. They all have things going on. But for you, in your life, that's the end of your story there. You just think, I
Yes.
don't, what am I doing here? I don't, everyone else is going about
That's right.
their
How can
life.
life still go on for
How can
everybody else?
life
And this
still
is
go?
happening to me. Yeah.
Yes. How can life still go
Wow.
on? People are out there buying apples. They've got lettuce on the conveyor belt, and my whole world has just completely melted. What am I going to do?
Mm.
And so it's been interesting. I'm still in that period where I'm still trying to figure out, who am I? I'm no longer a wife. I'm a widow. What does that mean? It is better now, 2 years in, than it was the first 6 months, the first 8 months, the first year.
Yeah.
But especially in the beginning, Joe, you take on an identity, and you define yourself by that identity. I mean, you're a mother, Joe, you're a wife. If all of those things were taken away,
Who are you
what
now?
would you do? You think, oh, I'm still a woman. Well, you are, but and that's the thing in marriage. You let go of some of yourself to become one with someone else. Then you become a mother, and then all of that, those your little ducks, those are yours. That's your identity there. You're
Mm.
providing and sheltering and tying shoes and packing lunches and doing all those things. And then they grow up and you take on a different identity. Then you become a grandmother, and then you're sheltering the great, but you're always in a role. But when all of that is taken, you think, what? I don't even remember who I am anymore. Do I like this? Do I like that? Do I like pizza on Friday nights? All the things that you have no idea. And so, trying to navigate all of that on top of grief, on top of my son's grief, and then running the farm that we have, it was a lot. But
Yes.
slowly, every day is a new day to try to figure something else out. And I've had to do things, Joe, that I never thought. I'm walking around with a power drill these days, things that I never knew how to do before. Well, there's nobody else to do them for me. So
Yeah.
I have to YouTube it. And with a power drill in one hand and YouTube on the other, I'm out there changing a tire, doing things that I never. So there is some redemption in that, if you will, because you actually recognize that you're stronger than you think you are. You're
Yeah.
stronger than you are, and that you have the capacity and the capability to press forward because you have to.
Yeah.
And had it not been for my son, who you required feeding and required clothing and required schooling and required, I don't know where I would be. But I know some widows that don't have that anymore, but yet, what would your spouse, would your husband want you to, he loved me so much. Would it not grieve him to see me not being able to move forward, not being able to live, if everything he provided for us was so that we could live?
Yes.
And so I had a choice. I guess I had a choice, and I decided, well, do I decide to wallow, to stay? And there's days that are still hard,
Mm.
um, or do I keep moving forward? And I chose the
Mm.
latter. And
In that way,
yeah,
honoring his life by you living
yeah,
rather than you.
yeah, yes.
Ruin.
It's interesting because he passed away, and you're married. There are days where you just want to wring his neck for whatever reason. You're just tired of the shoes at the back door. You're tired of, my husband had that habit of, he would take leftovers out of the refrigerator and he would put the empty container back into the fridge. And so there I come. I'm like, oh, I have some leftover soup. And I'd go into the refrigerator and I'd pull out the jar of soup and I'm like, it's empty. Did you eat it? Oh, yeah, it was good. Why'd you put the container back in? All
Uh,
of those arguments, Joe.
yeah.
Oh, you
Oh,
remember
I
all
bet
of
all
them?
you were looking for was an empty container in that
All I
fridge.
was looking for was an
Yeah.
empty container.
Oh, Gabby, that just.
Elizabeth Elliot, who is she's passed on now, but she's a speaker here in the U.S. and has written a number of Bible studies. And she said the sweetest sound to a widow is snoring.
Yeah.
And how many times have you not wanted to push that man right out of the bed because he wouldn't stop snoring? And now
Yeah.
you'd give anything to hear,
Yes.
and I just think, oh, what a gift on this side of that experience to actually treasure, to cherish the people that
Mm.
we love, flaws and all,
Yeah.
because life really is temporary. It's such a temporary thing. And so I would give anything to see the shoes by the back door and to see the empty containers in the refrigerator, to hear
Yeah.
the snoring at 2 o'clock in the morning. And instead of wanting to push him out,
Mm.
think, oh, he's still here. He's still alive. But I don't have that anymore. But
Mm.
going forward, what can I do to treasure the things that I do have and live a life of gratitude instead of one of lament?
Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful, Gabby. Thank you. I'm
Oh,
quite
thank
teary.
you.
So your huge, oh, I feel very teary. Your huge
You're so
loss has
sweet,
brought
dear.
about a new beginning. So how you approach life and living. So it's taught you about slowing down that pace of
Absolutely.
life, hasn't it? So can you tell us
It
more
really
about how that, what you've gone through has really moved you into a new beginning for you and your
Oh, dear.
family? So if, are you, can you tell us more about that? Because it is beautiful.
Yeah.
It's you've got something called unhurried living, and some people
Thank
may
you.
be aware of the slow living movement, and it's, I'm assuming,
Mhm.
tired, that sort of
Yes,
unhurried
very much
living.
so.
Yeah,
Yes,
so
thank you.
I'd love for you to tell us more
Yeah.
about that.
With my husband's experience, and even COVID, I will say there are a lot of bad things that happened about COVID. I get that, but there are a lot of good things too. I think there's people actually discovered that they like each other, they like home, they like each other. We were all kind of cloistered at home. We couldn't really go anywhere or do anything, so we had to be creative with our time. And we actually, families were able to come together. Some unfortunately were separated, but some were able. My husband was he was sent home, and we used that time before he got even more ill, became more ill. Oh, we would be, I don't know, the board games, the conversations, the all of those things. But I came during that period to discover that it's so easy in our modern world, Joe, to be distracted by so many other things that really don't intrinsically have a great deal of value. We spend a lot of time on social media. We spend a lot of time watching television. We spend a lot of time doing things, running to this errand, or taking, going to baseball practice, or going to, you're scattered in 1,000 different directions. And when you look at your value set, the things that you say are important to you, the things that you say, I'd lie in the middle of traffic to defend whatever principle in my life or whatever value in my life. But yet we live in a way that, and not everyone, but we live in a way, it's so easy to live in a way that doesn't really honor those values.
Yes.
If I say I value my marriage, but I'm out doing something every single day with girlfriends, or going out to this, or going out to, well, my marriage, even though I say it has priority, I'm doing other things other than prioritizing my husband and the time that I want to invest in my husband. I say I love my children, I love family, but yet we're off at baseball practice, and then karate next week, and then the music lesson on Thursday, and then you're off in 1,000 different directions when all that child really wants is to spend time with you. You say that you love reading, you love books, but you haven't picked up the book in 3 months. It's been sitting on your nightstand for 3 months unfinished. You're only on chapter 2, and so those things that, COVID really helped that. My husband's illness really helped that. But the idea of slowing down and really savoring the things that you say are of value to you, because life is short, time is precious, time is the only non-renewable resource that we have. Money you can go get, you can go make somewhere, but time, once it's gone, you can't get it back. And
Yeah.
so the idea of slow living, of unhurried living, not to say that those things, that we will all have seasons where we've got tons going on. Today we had this big event. It's Easter at the time of this recording, here in the US. And I had, 35, 40 people at my house today. And it was beautiful, but it was rushed. I had to clean the house and
And then you
vacuum
had
and
to
put
do
the
this podcast interview.
and now we're doing this interview, which is so lovely. We have busy times, but the
Yeah.
principle, essentially, the tenet, the foundation of our life here is that we live slowly. We
Yeah.
savor slow mornings. We savor, I make intentional time to read with a cup of tea. These are unhurried living is not lazy living.
Mm,
It's, I'm going to say no to the things that are not of a great significant value to me, and organize my life in such a way that the priorities I say I adhere to that are of value to me are prioritized, have first place before I add anything else. And as women, I think sometimes it's hard to say no to
mm.
things. It's hard to say no to our friends or our family, or, it's, oh, sure, I'll do that commitment, or, oh, I'll volunteer there, because we have hearts of servants, and we want to serve and help. And especially if you're a mother, you just want to feed all the people and love all the people. And but we can't. We simply cannot. It keeps us from, I think, being our best selves, and it also keeps us from giving our family our best self when we're stretched so thin that we can barely do the things that we say that we love to do, or give attention to the things that we say we value. And so, yeah, I've been practicing. This is, even before my husband became ill, but especially since my husband's illness, and even much more punctuated, much more articulated since he's passed on, is living a life where I say, these are my values, and everything else is a no to me. And some people think I deprive myself. We don't have a television, for example. Television for our family has been a significant distraction. And so we don't have a TV. People are like, that's crazy. How could you not? Is it? Because I really don't miss it. I don't catch all the news. I don't, because I can't do anything about who is in the White House here in the United States. I can't do anything I can vote, but,
Mm.
I do my civic duty. But in the end, I can't dictate those things. What I can control here in my own home is how I love, how I serve, and then the people around me, my community, my neighbors. How can I help? How can I serve them? How can I love them well? Those are the things I say I value. And I now have to make time and prioritize those things over political discussions or, I mean, the world is it's so easy to be distracted, so easy to
Yes.
be distracted. It's very intentional. Sometimes it can be hard work to be intentional, but all the freedom and abundance that comes from that, Joe,
Mm.
is just, yeah, I have margin, and I'm very grateful for that. Whereas I think that here in the US anyway, I feel like your culture, Joe, is, when I was down there, I don't know, people seemed so much more unencumbered. Maybe that's just the impression. I was just there a week, right? But,
Yeah.
people seemed just, and here in the US, it's very much, drive and push and go and work and
I think it depends where
achieve.
you
And
live and who you mix with. That
yeah,
element is definitely,
that's
both sides are definitely here. Um,
really,
but yeah, there are life lessons too that perhaps come at different ages, stages,
mm,
and do you find also getting older, Gabby? Because I know for me, that whole rushing and saying yes to things, because saying yes means saying no to something else, and
that's
often
right.
it's no to something that's really important to you
That's
in that
correct.
process. And I've just found, as I've been getting older, and going through my life and the things that have happened to me over the last few years, I've just that taking that step back to really question
Absolutely.
what is important and how I want to live. And
Absolutely.
yeah,
Oh,
the
I love that,
connection
Joe.
to
And that's what it is. That's what unhurried living is. It's the
mm,
idea that, is this really important to me? And when you get older, you recognize that the things that you thought were important
not
really
so
aren't
much.
all that important
Yeah,
at all.
no.
But when you're young, you don't know. I mean, and
Mm,
especially growing up, my parents were, they weren't born in this country. And so very much it was a push to go. You have to excel. You have to be better than we were. You have to have more than we had. And so it
yeah.
was a constant push for more and more. And so I became a person that defined themselves by their work product. If I couldn't achieve, then I didn't have value. I didn't have recognition. I didn't have significance. And now on this side, in my mid 40s, it's like, I don't care about significance. What I want is a life of peace and rest and abundance. And abundance
Yes.
doesn't mean money.
Yeah.
And for me, abundance means time. Do I have
Mm,
time to cherish my son, to live the way I want to live, to not have to abide by what somebody says I have to do? Because if it doesn't make me happy, if it doesn't make me at rest, if it doesn't align with me, what am I doing? Why am I
mm,
choosing that if I don't even want to be there?
mm.
And that's, yeah, I don't know. I think that aging, especially as women, and our culture doesn't deem it so, but I think it's a gift. You have wisdom, you have discernment, you have experience, and you have agency.
Yeah.
um, Although you have it in your younger years too, you just don't know you do.
Yes.
You have agency to choose and say, no, thank you. I would love to volunteer at that, but no, my Sundays or my weekends are preserved for this, or no, we have Friday movie night as a family and I can't
Yeah.
make any commitments. Thanks anyway. My family is really where I want to be. And so,
Yeah. The
yeah, there's
confidence
something
to
beautiful.
say yes comes or no comes more as you get older too, I think, doesn't it? To be strong in your
Oh yeah, you just feel like, well, you know what, and that's a beautiful thing about being older, right? You've already been there, you've done that, you realize that it wasn't all that great. You're not missing out on anything. What you really want is what you're cultivating. And
Yes.
for us, typically it's family, right? It's whether you have children or not, it's your spouse, whatever it is, your garden, I mean, whatever it is that brings and breathes life into you, that's where you want to be, because you recognize, I really don't have that many more years, right? I have 40 years. And if the first 40 flew by, the next 40 are going to fly even, and then could I potentially have health issues as I get older? Could I be,
Yes.
what can I do now that brings the fulfillment and the alignment that impacts the people that I love in good, beneficial ways, also serves me, because I'm done with the merry-go-round that they said was going to be good that really didn't turn out to be all that great anyway.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think there's a lot of value in that for
There
sure.
is,
For sure.
absolutely. And Gabby, there's been many highs since losing your husband, and one of them has been meeting a very special man, Jared, who I had the
Oh,
privilege of meeting as well. So this must be a really special time for you right now, as
oh,
well, to
Joe,
have
thank
Jared
you.
in your life and in your son's life.
Thank you. Yeah, the
Mm.
Lord brought, in my grief, I never expected. And here's the amazing thing though, Joe. I don't know, because there's still sorrow over the loss of my husband, but then there's still this amazing, abundant amount of joy. And only a woman my age, right? Your age, our age, can actually exist, because in this, maybe younger women too, I don't want to discredit that at all, but how does sorrow and joy exist in the same
Yeah.
person and the same heart and the same experience? I don't know. But it does. I have full recognition that this new individual, Jared, would not be in my life now were it not for the death of my husband. And I think he recognizes that as well. It's so being able to honor my husband, but still walk into this new experience, into a new life, a new marriage, a new family, if you will, a second chapter, a third chapter. In my case, I feel like, my 15th chapter of life, whatever it is new and exciting and fun. It's complicated, blending a family.
Yes.
And there's still sorrow. There are days where I either hear something or smell something, or, and I just think, oh, my husband, or you just have a hard day and you just think, if my husband were here, this wouldn't happen. But no, we all have hard days, and we just, but Joe, thank you. It's been beautiful. I feel like I'm 20 sometimes again. It's fun. It's fun
Yeah.
to remember what it's like to be me, I guess, and
That's
not
lovely.
a wife or a mother or I'm still a woman. I still like to have fun and enjoy things, and I love fresh flowers and enjoy having a night out for dinner, and just things like that you do when you're
Yeah.
young and in love, just that I'm not young. And so,
Well,
but I'm in
it's an
love.
absolute joy to see, and it's
Oh,
very
Joe,
it's very special. So I'm sure
thank
your
you.
extended family and all of your friends must be
Oh,
absolutely thrilled that you've got that as well.
they're happy. I think that,
Yeah.
it's interesting because the people that support a widow, they're there. And then when she finally finds happiness, they're like, phew, we can stop worrying. We can stop, and so I'm very
Yes.
grateful. They've all been very accepting of him, and it's been a lot of fun. And he speaks
Oh,
Spanish and
yes.
French,
Oh,
which
well,
just kind of
he ticks
impressed
all of
everyone.
those boxes. Then
He ticked off the boxes for my family because they all speak Spanish. They're like, yep, we'll keep him.
you pass. We'll take him. Yeah. Oh, that's gorgeous. So, Gabby,
Fun.
what are you looking forward to in the future? What's something that you're going, oh, now I can see light at the end of the tunnel?
Yeah.
There's a lot more lightness in my life now.
I love that. Thank you. Well, I am launching a new membership community this summer for homemakers, actually.
Ah,
Again, going
okay.
back to homemaking,
Yeah.
it's just, I feel like, and we talked a little bit about this before we hit record. I homemaking is a choice. It is, and I think here in this culture, at least in the U.S., I can say I don't think it's appreciated or valued as much. I mean, we're growing a generation. We're literally shepherding a generation of children to move on to be productive members of society, contributors to society, lovers of their families. And homemaking is hard work, and it's
Mm.
underappreciated. And so, it's a little bit of what my book is about. I have a book that's launching in the fall of this year. It's going to be released the fall of this year
And
on slow
that's all
living.
about fantastic.
Yes, it's
Have you
all.
got a title you can share, or is that still under wraps?
Well, the publisher, let's see if my publisher, I'll put this out there and see if my publisher likes it, because right now we're in talks about that title, All Things
Okay.
Lovely, is kind of the working title. I don't know if it'll end up being that. That's a publisher decision, but
Yeah.
All Things Lovely, really the idea being that if you slow down, evaluate your life. I have chapters on, do you really need financially, do you really need as much as you think you need? Could you work less so that you have more life? Could you, let's evaluate your finances. Let's evaluate your social media habits. Let's evaluate your food choices. I mean, real food feeds the body, and slowing down to actually prepare a home cooked meal is
Yeah.
something that we really, really don't do in this culture anymore, at least not in the
Yes.
US.
Yeah.
And sitting down with your family, seeing food as an event instead of just something to hurry up and heal the hunger. It actually is, in our culture, in the Latin culture anyway, it is, we sit at the table for
Point of
hours.
connection. Yeah.
We eat, and then we congregate, we have community, we have but just really connecting to jumping out of the matrix, even if temporarily. Could we establish habits and rhythms to our life that will enable us to cherish the things that we say we value?
Mm.
And yeah, so that's coming out in the fall of this year, and the membership community, late summer of the US time anyway. And yeah, just
Oh, you've
continue
got a
to
lot going
homestead.
on for this year alone, Gabby. That's
A lot
amazing.
going on.
Wow.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes.
Just I chase chickens most days out of the garden. The baby chicks are getting in there, and just, still living my life quietly on the homestead, and milking
Beautiful.
goats, making
Yep.
soap, and writing words. So, and connecting with
Fabulous.
lots of moms and women that really want to honor home, to be
Yeah.
homemakers, which I think is beautiful. So,
Well, your Instagram account is absolutely gorgeous with photographs and things that you
oh,
take there.
thank
So
you,
I'll pop,
Joe.
pop
You're so
those
sweet.
links, pop those
I'm
links in
so
there.
grateful that you support my content. It's if anyone wants to follow me, it's at Unhurried Living, Unhurried Living. But you'll see a lot of pictures of ducks and goats and chickens and sourdough. Sorry about that. But my
No, it's
son is
lovely.
like,
A
Mom.
lot of people would be watching that thinking, I wish that I could be a part of, what
Oh,
they probably wish that they had the time to do it. But the choice is always there at some point, isn't it? As
I
to
love that you said that, Joe, because it is a choice. We have
Mhm.
agency. We have more agency than they tell us that we have. And I
Mm.
think that if every woman recognized that alone, um, you can it empowers you to make different decisions. You don't have to make the decisions that they tell you that you have to make. You don't have to go into the workforce. You don't have to stay home. You don't have to I mean, you have agency. What life do you want? And what small incremental steps, either in habits, personal habits or rhythm, or in life choices like employment or where you live, geography, wherever. If you say you want something, what small steps are you taking to get there? And I think that sometimes we forget that we have that agency. We have to be good neighbors. We have to be good siblings. We have to be good children. We've got whatever it is. You don't have to do those things the way they tell you. If it doesn't align with you and your values, then what's it all for in the end?
Is that the advice you'd
You
like to
know.
leave us with, Gabby? Is that something that you would like for
Well,
women to hear? Like, because truly
thank
that
you,
really
Joe.
is such an important
I think
piece
so.
of the
I think
puzzle,
that
isn't
you
it?
have more agency than you're being told, than you're allowed to recognize. And if the life that you want, ultimately, if you have an ideal of what you want, the vision of where you want to be, whether it's somewhere on the corporate ladder, or, at one point in time, I had aspirations of being a superintendent of a school district, and I was a principal, and I was slowly making my way there. If that's your aspiration, if you want a large family, or if you want to go live out in the country, or
Mm.
whatever it is, what small steps are you taking? Because someone told me the other day, which I thought was a good phrase, but small hinges open big doors.
Huh.
And I loved that because I thought,
Yes.
oh, yeah, it's the small everyday rhythms that we make, the choices that we make, the habits that we instill in ourselves and in our family that'll get us where we want to go.
That's
And I
right.
don't think that people these days celebrate small.
No.
You have to be something really big and do something really
Mm.
gargantuan to be recognized. But the small things that we
That's
do
it.
in our everyday are what ultimately get the big doors opened.
Yeah, that's a great
Yeah.
analogy. Like another analogy I love too is that a ship of 1 degree can get you to an entirely different destination.
Oh,
Whereas
absolutely.
it's just doesn't
Absolutely.
doesn't take much at all. So,
No,
Gabby,
it
the
doesn't.
final question is: what would 80-year-old Gabby say about current day Gabby?
Oh, Joe, yeah, I'll tell you something that And this is going to be, I hope this isn't too salacious or anything for your audience, but I was on the beach at the Gold Coast with all of you, with all of us at our mastermind, and I'm a small framed person, but I have body issues too. Like I just think I have a fluffy midsection because I had a child. And, I am not at a point where I'm willing to sacrifice hours and hours at the gym. I run every day and I do watch, I'm very careful about my diet and my body and stuff, but I'm not quite willing to do that. But I do have a daily, exercise regime. But the people on the beach, Joe, there were some that were overflowing their swimsuits and they were happy,
Yeah.
Joe. They were and I thought, how come? Who cares whether I'm fluffy in a two-piece bathing suit? So I actually ordered a two-piece bathing suit when I was there.
Yes.
But the idea being my 80-year-old self, because I look back and what would I tell my 20-year-old self? Stop worrying about what other people think. And go live your life. Find out what it is that you love and go do the thing that you love and stop worrying about everything else, because life is just, oh, Joe, it's just too short to be 80-year-old Gabi. I hope would tell almost 45-year-old Gabi, live, just live, go live your life, be free, be happy, make the choices that align with you, that savor the things that you love. Because in the end, I hope that the people that I love will say of me that I loved well, that I loved well. And that's in the end, that's all I want to do is love well. I love the people that the Lord puts in my life, my neighbors, the people that he sent to me, the people that are in my home, the people that come to my home. I just want them to feel like they were loved. And I don't know, I think I would tell, like, I look back and I think my 20-year-old self, I would tell you, stop worrying about that. Stop feeling like you need to dress a certain way, act a certain way. Your body has to be a certain way. You have agency, go do your own thing. So I hope my 80-year-old self would, tell this self. I love that question, Joe. I'm gonna have to, I keep answering different things, but I think I'm gonna have to go back and ponder that. But yeah, be free. Be free. Be who you are.
Well, that is a lovely way to end our chat today. So thank you so much, Gabi. I have absolutely loved it. You've taken us on a very, very big ride today. I've had the moments of laughing, of moments of crying, and of moments of just wanting to reach across the screen and give you a big hug. So thank you so much for your transparency and your honesty and your vulnerability today.
No, Joe, thank you for just the space and what you do. It just, these are the years, right?
Absolutely,
these are the years, and I wouldn't go back to
No,
my 20s.
no. As much as I love them,
Honestly.
I've done it before. Here's to going forward.
That's absolutely. Oh, absolutely. I mean, these are the years, and I feel like the best ones, because here's the thing, at our age, you're kind of unencumbered. You're like, I'm done with that. And there's a lot of freedom here.
Absolutely. I truly believe the best is yet to come.
No, I agree.
Thank you,
Oh,
Gabi.
Joe, thank you. Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening and sharing your time with me today. I'd love you to hit subscribe on Apple Podcast or your favorite podcast app to keep spreading these empowering messages. Please share this podcast with other incredible midlife women in your world. Join me again next week for another redefining midlife conversation. Thanks again for tuning in.